Well, we didn't know exactly what we would get here at the Gabba today for day 4 of this third test match between Australia and India, and what transpired, well, it was a roller coaster ride to say the least. Sam Jordan from 9 News, joined by Dan Brettig from The Age. Dan, let's start with the big talking point of the day, which is, of course, away from the playing field. Josh Hazelwood suffering a calf injury. His series, the team admits, is now likely over. It is a huge blow and also a devastating blow to someone who's had a really tough run with injuries too.
Yeah, well, he was described as despondent by Australia's assistant coach, Daniel Vittori, tonight. And, that's not a word that an assistant coach should throw around lightly. You might hear that they're a bit disappointed or a little bit frustrated. But, yeah, clearly Josh, at 33 years old, this is a real blow to him. I think it puts him at a little bit of a career crossroads in terms of, what happens next year. Because if you're struggling to stay on the park as a fast bowler, he'll be feeling keenly that he's let his teammates down, that he's put a bit of a dent in Australia's chances in this series with what's happened this morning in the warm-ups. And that's going to take him a little while to recover from.
He's such an upbeat guy, Josh Hazelwood. Usually, I was at Scans this afternoon when he did receive that news, and he was dejected to say the least. I haven't seen him that devastated before, and it goes to show why. Calf injuries are ones that you see across all sports. They do say it's an ageing athlete's injury, and it can be something really tricky to come back from. You mentioned there about his career at a crossroads. Do you think that with the lure of a home summer next year that, it's something that he'd be trying to get up for? I guess time will tell just how difficult it is going to be for him.
Oh, he'll be definitely trying to get up for that, but it's just a question of being able to come up for matches. I mean, it's not as though he's got major injury issues that are causing him to miss long stretches of time. But if you get into a test series and you can't sort of get into your work and keep fit and keep going with it, it does cause a lot of questions. Some bowlers can, find a way back from that. Jimmy Anderson was one, 2019 Ashes. He had some soft tissue issues which he was able to find a way through and come back and obviously continue playing Test cricket until just earlier this year. But yeah, it does give pause to a lot of fast bowlers in terms of when they're getting into those mid-30s. And it's a big contrast as well with Pat Cummins and Mitchell Starc. Those guys only seem to be getting more durable. Yeah. And there's a bit of a gap there in terms of the amount of Test matches that they're being able to front up for compared to Josh Hazelwood.
Well, fingers crossed for Hazelwood and for a fast recovery as well. Look ahead one Test match. Cummins did actually say the day before the presser that before the Test match in a press conference that he would be surprised if we didn't see Scott Boland again in this series. A luxury for Australia to have someone of Scott's quality to call on for the Boxing Day Test.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of bench strength, particularly coming into the MCG, there's no one better than Scott Boland. He was pretty unlucky, I reckon, to not get to play here, having bowled very, very well in Adelaide. He's certainly someone who likes bowling to India in conditions that help him, and he will get that at the MCG. So, he'll be right to go. I think he was bowling in the nets today. So he's a very able replacement. It's just a question of whether India handle him a little bit better second time around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, all of this has been unfolding while there is still a Test match going on inside, and a really interesting day of Test match cricket as well. Yesterday, India didn't show any fight or any resolve with the bat. Today, they really dug in and look, to skip to the end, they've avoided the follow-on. It's a very precarious position for Australia. To go back to the start, Dan, how do you think the Aussies went about it?
Yeah, I think they, given that they lost Josh Hazelwood before play effectively, although he came back and tried to bowl one over, the fact that Steve Smith dropped a catch first ball of the day, that was a little bit of a setback for them. Meant KL Rahul was able to get into his work and keep them out there for a period of time. Steve Smith then made amends with a terrific catch to get KL Rahul off Nathan Lyon, diving away to his right. But yeah, it was a challenge for them through the day. They weren't able to, I guess, roll through India for 100, 150. But even so, they got the 9th wicket, Ravindra Jadeja, when there was still 30-odd runs left for India's last pair to get. And so at that stage, they were still very much intent on enforcing the follow-on, as Dan Vittori told us tonight. So it's really only that last partnership between Bumrah and Akashdeep that got India to avoid the follow-on, and you saw some pretty happy scenes in the Indian team dressing room or viewing area when that happened.
Look, let's start at the end of the day on from an India's perspective as well. As far as last wicket partnerships go, they were extraordinary. Not only did they handle the pressure, but they also put it back on Australia too.
Yeah, well, Akashdeep, there were some comparisons being made with Ashton Agar actually before the end of play as someone who didn't look like a number 11, and his contribution was critical there. Obviously, Boomerang hooking Pat Cummins for 6 when Cummins went the short ball option was another moment to remember. And I mean, they had the advantage of facing the Australian bowlers at the end of a long day. When the ball was getting soft, it was getting close to the second new ball. But those circumstances meant that Australia couldn't quite get that last wicket. There'll be some questions to be asked about, maybe they could have targeted the stumps a little bit more, maybe they could have had their fields slightly different. But the explanation at the end of the day was really that, the ball was soft, and as we know from when Australia bat, that's when Travis Head likes to have a go, and in this case it was Boomerang Deep doing that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, with no Hazelwood, it meant that Cummins and Stark took on a little bit more workload as well. It's always a balancing act, looking towards that next test match too. Were there any concerns from Victoria about the extra workload they had to take on?
Essentially, he said that they were, at their expected loads, or have been at their expected loads all the way through the series, or even a little bit under, given how Adelaide finished so quickly. It was only that last partnership where they bowled a few extra overs and were trying to get through that last wicket, where I guess the strain was showing a little bit. This, I suppose, the lack of the follow-on means that they won't bowl immediately tomorrow, which may be better for them for the Melbourne and Sydney Test matches.
All right, let's try and look into the crystal ball to tomorrow. Now, we don't know what we're going to get with the weather. We were expecting a lot of rain here today, and we essentially got almost a full day's playing. But how do you think Australia will approach this? Because now they have no choice. They're not getting the follow-on enforced onto India, and now they need to try and, I guess, take a bit of a gamble in a way.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting risk-reward. Obviously, the weather is uncertain. We might get some rain tomorrow. We might not get some rain tomorrow. It also is a question of, will Australia give India a target that they could feasibly chase? And I feel like with having played such a good Test match, sort of been denied the right to get into a more advantageous position by the weather more than anything else. I think Pat Cummins will have to weigh that up really carefully, and it'll also be interesting to see what the commentary is if he doesn't give India a chase that they can chase, and the game peters out to a draw, because we don't see too many of those these days.
Look, and I don't want to think too far ahead already, but I guess what this does mean is that if there is a draw in Brisbane, it makes that Boxing Day Test match even bigger than what it is going to be. I'm already thinking about it as a cricket fan. It is going to be extraordinary.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, the Indian team were very happy to avoid the follow-on. They now know that the most likely scenario here is that it's a live series going into Melbourne and Sydney, and that's great for them. It's a little bit of a turn back for the Australians relative to how this game has gone, but you're right, it's certainly great for spectators, and there might even be a couple of SCG members thinking, hey, we might get a live Test match for once.
That's exactly right, and certainly some nervous members thinking about the weather that we have seen in Brisbane here as well. Well, after a day like today, we don't want to make any predictions about tomorrow, but one thing that we do know for sure is that it's going to be another gripping day of cricket. We will see you back here at the same time then.